What if I told you three Irishmen helped shape the twin guitar sound that birthed heavy metal, then watched addiction tear it all apart? 12 albums in 13 years. A black frontman in a country with almost no black citizens. A guitarist glassed on the eve of their biggest tour. Another fled mid-performance, leaving them stranded. And their leader, a poet who wrote anthems about brotherhood, died alone on Christmas, found by his mother. This is the rise and fall of Thin Lizzy. Dublin, Ireland, late 1960s. If you wanted to make it in rock and roll, this was about the worst place you could start. The Irish music scene was dominated by traditional folk acts and sanitized show bands that performed watered-down versions of top 40 hits for conservative audiences. There were no major record labels, no connection to the industry powerhouses in London or New York, just cold Atlantic wind, packed pubs, and the dream that maybe, just maybe, a group of Irish kids could break through. Philip Paris Lionot had that dream, and he refused to let it die. Raised by his grandparents in the working-class district of Crumlin, Lionot was one of the few black children in the entire country. His mother, Philomena, was Irish. His father was from British Guiana. In a nation still deeply conservative and insular, Lionot could have been crushed by prejudice. Instead, he turned his outsider status into armor. He joked that being black and Irish was as natural as a pint of Guinness, dark, rich, and unmistakably Dublin. Before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Along with his school friend and drummer Brian Downey, Lionot began assembling what would become Thin Lizzy in December 1969. They recruited guitarist Eric Bell and bassist Eric Rickson, merging members from two local bands, Orphanage and Them. The name came from a robot character in the British comic strip The Dandy called Thin Lizzy. When pronounced in a thick Dublin accent, it sounded like Thin Lizzy. It was playful, irreverent, and perfect for a band that refused to take themselves too seriously. But behind the humor was serious ambition. Lionot wanted to synthesize the soul and swagger of American rhythm and blues with the poetic storytelling of the Irish tradition. He wanted to write songs about mythology, street life, outlaws, and heartbreak, all wrapped in hard electric rock and roll. Their first single, The Farmer, released in July 1970, was a commercial disaster. It sold only 283 copies. Today, it's a rare collector's item, but back then, it was just proof that nobody was paying attention. Their self-titled debut album in April 1971 blended folk, blues, and psychedelia, but it lacked a clear identity. Critics were confused. Audiences were indifferent. The band was broke. Decca Records had signed them, but the label had no idea what to do with this strange Irish outfit that didn't fit any commercial category. Lionot and Bell often performed in the folk clubs just to pay rent, a grinding reality that built a deep connection with their local audience but did nothing to advance their career. This early era matters because it represents the belief before fame, the grueling work ethic of a band that refused to quit despite a lack of commercial traction and a debt that was already beginning to mount. They were four outsiders with one impossible vision: to take Irish rock beyond folk traditions and into the international arena. The machine wasn't working, but the dream was still alive. The turning point came in late 1972 as a total accident, a lark that would haunt the band for years to come. While rehearsing in a London pub, Lionot began messing about with a rock arrangement of the traditional Irish folk song, Whiskey in the Jar. It was just something to kill time, a throwaway experiment, but their manager, Ted Carroll, heard something different. He recognized the infectious guitar-driven melody and insisted they record it as a B-side. To the band's dismay, Decca Records promoted it as the A-side and pushed it to radio stations across the UK and Ireland. The song exploded. By February 1973, Whiskey in the Jar had reached #1 in Ireland and #6 in the UK. Thin Lizzy was suddenly famous, but for all the wrong reasons. This was the classic wrong hit problem, and many remember how often it destroyed great bands. Thin Lizzy considered themselves a hard rock outfit, influenced by Jimi Hendrix and Free. They wanted to shake stadiums with enormous riffs and poetic street anthems. Instead, they were being booked on television shows as a folk rock novelty act, expected to perform in traditional Irish clothing and play up the whiskey image. Guitarist Eric Bell was particularly frustrated. He felt they were degrading Irish traditions by turning a centuries-old folk song into a radio-friendly rock anthem. The tension within the band was palpable. Success had arrived, but not on their terms. The follow-up single, The Rocker, released in November 1973, was a deliberate attempt to assert their hard rock identity. It reached number 11 in Ireland, but failed to replicate the commercial impact of Whiskey. The album Vagabonds of the Western World arrived in September 1973, but by then, the damage was done. The band was trapped in an image they never wanted, and the pressure was destroying them from the inside. The breaking point came on New Year's Eve 1973 in Belfast. Eric Bell, suffering from the physical and mental toll of the band's lifestyle and the pressure of their newfound fame, threw his guitar into the air mid-performance and walked off stage. He was done. Just like that, the first chapter of Thin Lizzy was over. Lionot and Downey were left as a duo, facing a mountain of debt and an uncertain future. They had tasted success, but it had nearly killed them. The question wasn't whether they could survive, it was whether they even wanted to. But Phil Lionot refused to quit, and what came next would change rock and roll forever. The collapse of the original lineup forced Phil Lionot to rebuild from scratch, and in doing so, he accidentally invented a sound that would define an entire genre. In 1974, Lionot recruited two young guitarists, Brian Robertson, a 19-year-old Scottish technical wizard, and Scott Gorham, a laid-back American with a Gibson Les Paul and a taste for melodic solos. Neither had ever played in a band of this caliber before, but together, they created something unprecedented, a twin guitar harmony style that was as melodic as it was powerful. This wasn't the major key country harmonies of the Eagles or the Allman Brothers. This was minor key, atmospheric and tough, perfectly suited to Lionot's lyrical themes of outlaws, soldiers, and heartbreak. The technical innovation was often a happy accident in the studio. A delay effect on a single guitar line led them to experiment with live harmonies, and suddenly they had a signature sound that no one else could replicate. Between 1975 and 1979, Thin Lizzy transformed into a world-straddling colossus. They released a string of classic albums, Fighting in 1975, Jailbreak in 1976, Johnny the Fox in 1976, Bad Reputation in 1977, and Black Rose, a rock legend in 1979. This was the era of the Marshall stack, the leather jacket, and the relentless touring schedule that saw them play 200 days a year. For the listeners, this was the peak of rock power. This was the sound of freedom, rebellion, and blue-collar pride. The breakthrough moment came with Jailbreak in March 1976. The album's lead single, The Boys Are Back in Town, was an instant anthem, a celebration of brotherhood, Friday nights, and the promise that no matter where life takes you, the boys always come back. The song reached number 12 in the US and became a permanent fixture on FM radio. Thin Lizzy had finally broken America. The success was overwhelming. They toured with Queen, headlined arenas across Europe, and became one of the most respected live rock bands in the world. Their 1978 live album, Live and Dangerous, captured the raw energy and communion between band and audience that defined their peak years. Many consider it one of the greatest live albums ever recorded, but beneath the platinum records and sold-out shows, cracks were already forming. The relentless pace, 12 albums in 13 years, was beginning to rot the band's foundation from the inside. By the late 1970s, the endless touring schedule that had made Thin Lizzy successful began to extract its price. The band consumed drugs to cope with the grinding routine of travel, performance, and exhaustion. What started as recreational use became dependency. Phil Lionot and Scott Gorham, in particular, developed serious heroin addictions. The brotherhood that had sustained them, the loyalty, the shared vision, began to erode under the weight of chemical dependency and professional pressure. Brian Robertson's volatile personality only made things worse. He refused to follow orders from Lionot, whom he viewed as too controlling. The masculine struggle for dominance within the band created constant friction. Robertson was a brilliant guitarist, but he was also unpredictable, confrontational, and increasingly unreliable. Then came the catastrophic incident that nearly destroyed them. On November 11, 1976, on the eve of a major U.S. tour with Queen, Robertson intervened in a fight at the Speakeasy Club in London to protect his friend, singer Frankie Miller. Someone smashed a glass into Robertson's hand, severing tendons and nerves. The injury was severe enough to require emergency surgery and months of rehabilitation. The U.S. tour was canceled. Lionot was furious. He viewed Robertson's actions as a personal betrayal, a reckless decision that cost the band a massive opportunity. Thin Lizzy had been on the verge of conquering America, and now they were grounded. Robertson was temporarily replaced by Gary Moore, a disciplined Irish guitarist who had played with Lionot in earlier bands. Moore brought technical brilliance and stability, but he couldn't tolerate the band's increasing drug use and erratic behavior. After contributing to the album Black Rose, a rock legend in 1979, Moore famously quit in the middle of a U.S. tour, abandoning the band mid-performance and leaving them to finish shows as a trio. This cycle of firing and rehiring guitarists became a hallmark of the band's decline. Robertson returned, then left again. Moore returned, then left again. Midge Ure filled in temporarily. Snowy White joined in 1980, bringing a bluesier, more laid-back style, but by then, the damage was done. This was the era when work-related pressure and the culture of excess quietly destroyed talented people in their prime. The music was still incredible, but the men creating it were falling apart. By the early 1980s, Phil Lynott was carrying the weight of the band almost entirely alone, creatively, emotionally, and financially. His heroin dependency had escalated, ruining his marriage to Caroline Crowther and isolating him from his bandmates. The albums released during this period, Chinatown in 1980 and Renegade in 1981, showed signs of a band losing its focus. The songs were still strong, but the energy was fading. The industry was moving toward the new wave of British heavy metal, a movement that Thin Lizzy had inspired, but was now struggling to keep pace with. In a final attempt to rejuvenate the band, Lionott recruited guitarist John Sykes in 1982. Sykes was young, hungry, and brought a metallic edge that injected new life into the band. The resulting album, Thunder and Lightning, released in March 1983, was their heaviest and most aggressive material yet. It reached number 4 in the UK, and reminded fans why Thin Lizzy had been legends in the first place. But it was too late. Exhausted and ill, Lynott announced a farewell tour. The final performance of Thin Lizzy with Lynott took place on September 4th, 1983, at the Monsters of Rock Festival in Nuremberg, Germany. The bill included Ozzy Osbourne and Motorhead, peers who had survived their own excesses, making the dissolution of Thin Lizzy feel even more tragic. The audience gave them a highly emotional send-off, knowing it was the last time the boys would be back in town. Without the structure of the band to keep him grounded, Lynott's descent into addiction only accelerated. The years following the breakup were a period of unresolved dreams for Phil Lynott. He attempted to launch a new project called Grand Slam, which became a live fixture at festivals, but failed to secure a record deal. Labels were wary of his reputation as a drug user, a stigma that now overshadowed his immense talent as a songwriter and performer. As Christmas 1985 approached, Lynott had retreated into daily substance abuse. He appeared gaunt and ashen to his few remaining friends. He was dying, and everyone knew it. On Christmas Day 1985, Phil Lynott collapsed at his home in Kew. He was found by his mother, Philomena, and rushed to a drug clinic, then onto a local hospital. The diagnosis was devastating: septicemia, kidney damage, and liver damage, all the result of years of heroin and alcohol abuse. After 11 days in the intensive care unit, Phil Lynott died on January 4th, 1986, from pneumonia and heart failure. He was only 36 years old. From the grave, I heard it falling. The news was an emotional gut punch to the rock community. One of the era's most soulful and real frontmen, a poet warrior who had lived the life he sang about, had finally lost his battle with the lifestyle he had once mythologized. The tragedy was compounded by the fact that Lynott was working on new material and had even discussed reforming Thin Lizzy just before his death. His funeral services in London and Dublin were attended by the peers he had influenced and the fans who had lived through the peak years of his fame. The Black Rose of Irish rock was gone, leaving behind a legacy of music that outlived the chaos of its creator's life. Thin Lizzy's influence has only grown in the decades since their fall. They are now recognized as foundational to the development of hard rock and heavy metal. Bands like Metallica, Iron Maiden, and Mastodon cite them as essential inspirations. Metallica's cover of Whiskey in the Jar introduced Thin Lizzy to an entirely new generation of fans. Iron Maiden covered Massacre, highlighting the twin guitar influence that defined both bands. Phil Lynott is finally acknowledged not just as a rock star, but as one of the great poets of the 20th century, a writer who could capture the slice-of-life working-class dramas of love, hate, and rebellion with a unique Irish sensitivity. In 2005, a bronze statue of Lynott was erected on Harry Street in Dublin, a permanent tribute to the man who put Irish rock on the map. The 2020 documentary Songs for While I'm Away provided a major reassessment of his life, revealing the depth of his artistry and the human cost of his success. Thin Lizzy's story provides a sense of closure. The band didn't fail, they simply burned too fast. Their music, the twin guitar harmonies, the poetic lyrics, and the raw energy of their live performances remains a staple of classic rock radio, a permanent fixture in the soundtrack of an entire generation. They were a band of genuine, real, and honest outsiders who played music that made people feel something: rebellion, pride, and a deep, enduring nostalgia for the golden age of rock. Thin Lizzy proved that the brightest fires burn the fastest. 12 albums in 13 years, a pace that would have killed most bands outright. They invented a sound, conquered arenas, and gave voice to the outsiders. But the machine they built devoured them from within. Phil Lynott died at 36, but his poetry lives forever. What's your favorite Thin Lizzy memory? Drop it in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from rock's golden era.